Greetings. Welcome back to another session of English grammar. Today we're going to be studying metalanguage. And the metalanguage is language about language, studying about language, thinking about language. A lot of what we're going to be talking about today is really vocabulary descriptions of linguistic words so that we can understand what these words are when we go to play with them during the rest of our lecture series. Today we're going to be looking at subsentential terms and sentential terms and suprasentential terms. Okay, sentential terms, again, is a phrase I had not heard very often. It was used in this text, and this is the textbooks that we are using. This is the grammar book by Cels Mercia Larson Freeman, and so they brought it up in their text, and so therefore we're going to bring it up in this discussion. We're going to be looking at these three areas, and again, most of this is all about vocabulary. Let's jump right into the first section here, which is the subsentential terms. Three criteria when you're looking at a word or a group of words and you're trying to identify what is this thing. Some of the things that you're going to want to look at is, first of all, its form, right, or its structure. Right? You're going to try to look at its structure. What's its form? And you want to look at its function. What's its job in the sentence? Okay? And then, of course, you'll want to look at the semantics. Okay? When you're looking at everything in context, trying to figure out what this word means. And so those are the three things that you're going to want to look at. At the semantic level, you've got to realize that when you're looking at a word in a sentence, even though, for example, blue is a noun or an adjective, color or emotion or color as an adjective as well. Depending on where it is in the sentence, may also play a factor in what its meaning is. Depending on the context of all the words around it, it may influence what the word's meaning is. He's had a blue day. Well, a blue day, it's going to be an adjective, but the meaning is going to be a little different. If I were to say he's blue, right, that would also have a different meaning, saying that he's not happy, but it also may mean he's not breathing. Right, depending on the context. So we want to look at the semantics when we're trying to understand the meaning of words. We also, so I could do the same thing with bank. Bank can be a noun, it can be an adjective, it can be a verb, but the semantics of the words around it can also play a part in defining what that word actually means. For our purposes, the majority of what we're going to be looking at is the structure and function of a word. And so we're going to look at the structure of the word. So, for example, we look at the word steel. We think, oh, steel, it's a noun, right? I bought some steel. The house is made out of steel. Okay, but I could say also steel magnolias. It's no longer a noun. It's in the adjective slot, but its structure is still noun-like. I could look at the word walking. Walking, when I see ing, I immediately think verb. I see ing, and all of a sudden I'm looking around, where's my be verb that goes with this? But it may not be there. Even though its structure looks like a verb, it could be a noun. Walking is fun. Right? I like walking. Could be an adjective. This walking path. Right? So it could be a number of different things. Driver. You look at the word driver. ER. The minute you see ER, you're like, oh, okay, that's a person. Right? I'm the driver. Right? The driver of the car. Okay? But then you've got things like driver training. All of a sudden, it's an adjective. Its structure, though, looks like it's a noun. Okay? So we've got the structural element that we want to look at. And then we have the functional. Okay, we have the functional. Where is it in the sentence as far as what slot is it in? We go back up here to driver training, okay, and look, the training is ing, look at that. And driver is now sitting in an adjective position. It's sitting right before a noun, and so it's going to describe the noun. It's sitting in the noun position. That's its function. Okay, so it's probably an adjective, right? Training is sitting in a noun position. Even though it looks like a verb, it's sitting in a noun position, and as you read the context, you realize it is in fact a noun. You could do the same thing with things like paper, okay, which looks like a noun, but when you say paper tiger, all of a sudden, a noun and a noun, the first noun is going to be an adjective. It's in the adjective position. Same thing here with lightning and lightning bug. So we've got three ways that we can try to determine what something is in a sentence and what something means in a sentence. The semantic, okay, where it is in context with all the other words that are around it. The structural, what does it look like structurally, and functional, where is it, what slot is it in a particular sentence, okay? Take a look at the parts of speech. You guys normally, I would assume you know all these major parts of speech, the noun, verb, adjective, and adverb. You probably know these eight elements: prepositions, pronouns, determiners, conjunctions, and auxiliaries. Determiners, for those you don't know, are basically articles and maybe possessive pronouns. We'll look at determiners later, but that's basically what those are. Conjunctions, I'm assuming you all know from, conjunction, junction. Remember that little, I forget what it was, grammar rock, right? If you remember those. We might look at those later on in the semester. Anyway, conjunctions, right? And, so, but, and then auxiliaries. And auxiliaries are basically your helping verbs and also all of your modals. That's where they go. Interesting thing about the major the major parts of speech is that they're open. I can add more to them. Continually adding new words to the open parts, right? Continually adding new nouns and verbs and adjectives and adverbs. Look at the word nanotechnology. It's a brand new word, relatively speaking, and yet we can just keep adding to them. The closed category words are not categories that we typically add words to. We're not adding new prepositions. We're not adding new pronouns to the language. Okay, they're more structural. They help determine what the sections of a sentence are. They help determine what parts of a sentence are. So they're structural in meaning. They don't really carry a lot of content or meaning like the open categories do. They're closed. Okay, open and closed. Let's take a beginning look at nouns here. And when I was growing up, it was always, oh, it's a person, it's a place, or a thing. That's what a noun is. A person, place, and thing. Person, place, and thing. That's what I grew up with. And then later on, I started hearing people talk about, well, there are also ideas. And so it began to expand. Actually, the definition didn't expand. The explanation for what a noun was began to expand as linguists began to evaluate language more. And that's all that is. In any event, nouns are your primary block of words. They're the ones that do most of the description, most of the things that are out there. We have common nouns, and these are nouns that basically don't have a specific identity. I can look at this and say this is a mouse, right? Or this is a monitor. This is a camera, right? But if I give this mouse a name, I call this mouse Steve. Right? And then I can say to somebody, hey, where's Steve? And now Steve is going to have a capital name because he's no longer common, he's now proper. Right? Named items are going to be proper nouns, right? The Eiffel Tower, my brother Fred, all of these that have proper nouns. We have nouns, things that we can count. I can count tables and chairs. I can count stools and sofas. And then there are non-count, things like furniture. I can't count furniture. I can't count transportation. I can't count rice, one rice, two rice. No, one grain of rice, right? 2 grains of rice. I can't count corn. I can't count, I can't even count pants, which is, it looks like it ends in plural, right? How many pants you got? I got 2 pair of pants. I got 3 pair of pants. 3 pants? Yeah. Anyway, so there are count and then there are non-count. Then there are collective nouns. And a collective noun I would pretty much consider a noun count type of idea. These are where you have groups of individuals that we group them all together in some sort of a collective. The school, right? The class, the family, right? It's a group of individual items, right? To be a collective. And we consider it a singular, right? The class is going, right? This family is planning. And lastly, I wanted to just show you some of the places where nouns get placed in a sentence. They can be the subject or the direct object or the indirect object. They can be the object of a preposition. They can be an appositive. They can be the object of a noun predicate. And I believe that's all I had. Okay? So nouns go in a variety of different slots within the sentence. Take a look at the next one here. Verbs. Yay! Verbs have a number of descriptions as well. Just a quick definition here is the action or state of being in a sentence. Verbs can have tense. It's interesting, the authors here mention 3 tenses. Typically it's only 2 tenses, and this is because when you have a verb, okay, you can modify it in one way directly. So we have the word eat. Eat is in the present tense. And the only way that we can modify eat, making it ate, is to make it in the past tense. If we want to use any other tense, or what I would call aspect, actually the book calls it aspect as well, it would be that I would have to add something to it. Like if I want a future, I have to add will. If I want progressive, I have to add a be verb, right? So the text here says that it's past, present, and future would be the tenses. I would probably disagree with that and probably say that there are only two, and that if you're adding any elements to it, that would now be called an aspect. An aspect is also a modification of time to make it that it's progressive or that it's perfect, or in my case, that it's future. An aspect is like a tense. Now, if I'm going to be teaching ESL students, I'm not going to talk about aspect at all. I'm simply going to call them tenses. All of them, all 12 of them. And I'm not going to go into, well, this is an aspect, it's really not a tense. Who cares? They only want to learn how to communicate. So it's future tense. It's present progressive tense, okay? Here, when we're trying to understand and explain everything, I just wanted to let you know, again, we're looking at vocabulary. An aspect is a modification of the time, and it generally includes more than one point in time. Okay, like present is 1 point in time. Okay, right now, and now that's past now. And past is also 1 point in time. But when you talk about progressive, you're talking about, let's just take a quick, here's 1 point in time, and you're talking about something that's happening throughout a span of time, right? This is now, let's say, for example. Our little discussion here began in the past and continued until now, and it's going to continue until into the future. That's going to be a progressive type of idea, okay? Or if we're looking at present progressive, for example, and that's that there's something that happened sometime in the past, and it's when that past, I don't know, but it happened sometime in the past, and it completed sometime between the past and now, okay? With regard to verb inflections, we have some other things related to person and number. We have third person singular, right? I swim, you swim, he swims, right? Or es for that as well. We can also do swimming, which is ing, or en or an for a perfect tense, right? Has swum, is swimming. Okay, you've got those four tenses. I'm sorry, four inflections. Additionally, you can determine more about a noun by looking whether it's transitive or it's intransitive or it's distransitive or it's linking. Transitive, intransitive, and distransitive, it has to do with whether it must carry an object or not. Okay, transitive verbs require an object, right? I gave, period, doesn't work. I need an indirect object and a direct object, right? So that would be ditransitive. Transitive, of course, or transitive means that it's got to be something on the other side. Okay, I slept. Period. I don't need anything. It's intransitive, right? And so that's the difference. Transitive, I need something on the other side of the verb. Ditransitive, I need two things on the other side of the verb, right? Intransitive, I don't need anything on the other side of the verb, right? I sat down, right? We ate. Okay, but you know, I throw. Gotta throw something, right? I threw the ball out the window. I need something on the other side. Yeah, therefore, it's transitive. Okay? And marked or not marked. Marking has to do with the difficulty of something and also whether it includes aspects like the requirement of subject-verb agreement. Okay? Whether it's marked or not marked with that. And we'll talk more about subject-verb agreement in later lectures. Okay, jump into adjectives here, and an adjective is, I hope you all know, it's describing something, right? The quality of something. When I'm teaching little tots, I'm always saying an adjective describes a noun. Okay, what does an adjective do? It describes a noun. We get to adjective clauses then. I'm saying it's a clause that describes a noun, right? It's describing something. Same type of thing. So anyway, adjectives describe nouns. There are two basic types of adjectives, okay? There are attributive adjectives, and those that are in front of a noun, right? The red balloon. And there are predicative adjectives, right? And those are the ones that go after a noun. And there are a number of inflectional forms with adjectives. Things like ER and EST would be some of the examples that come to mind for me as far as inflectional forms. Lastly, here we have adverbs. Adverbs are the least used, the least popular of the open category, although they still are major. And there are different types of parts of speech. And so, for example, we have one here of direction. John pointed there in that direction. We have ones for location. We have ones for time. We have ones for frequency. We have one for manner. Okay, and there are literally groups of these that you could teach. Oftentimes, when I'm teaching adverbs, I'll do a whole block of them, right? So, for example, if I'm going to be teaching adverbs of frequency, I'll list the top 7 or 8 adverbs, and we'll talk about them, right? Like never, rarely, hardly ever, sometimes, usually, right? And we'll talk about what they mean and what percentage they are, because probably in that student's language they have something similar. And I'll do the same thing with the other ones as well, whether it's direction or manner. There's a group of them that are primarily your main ones. There probably are some others, but that's how I go ahead and teach them. Okay. So adverbs describe the verb. Adjectives describe the noun. And so it's describing the verb in terms of direction or locality or manner. Right? Describing the manner of the verb, describing the time or the frequency. Okay. Some other parts of speech, and again, these are your smaller, your minor categories. We've got things like pronouns. And pronouns, there are about 3 or 4 different categories for pronouns. We've got subject pronouns, object pronouns, possessive pronouns. Subject pronouns, again, they replace a noun in the subject slot, or the object pronouns replace a noun in the object slot. Possessives, again, describe the ownership of a word, right? Possessive pronoun. It's mine, right? It's mine. We have determiners. We have articles, right? A, an, and the. A ball, the ball, all right? An apple. We have demonstrative, this, that, these, those. We have possessive determiners. My ball. I didn't add those in here, so you probably want to do that. We have possessive determiners as well, right? My ball, your ball, right? We have prepositions, and it's a fun category to play with. And the only real thing that goes with prepositions are phrases. Prepositions help define more aspects of the verb, things like ownership and location. Also can be used in some form as an adjectives, right? The man of the hour, which is describing which man, okay? Prepositions, again, there are only about 9 or 10 of these, probably a little more, all right? In and, on, around, in front, behind, through. Oftentimes you hear people talk about, well, you can describe a preposition by asking, any place, where could a mouse go? You can go on the table, around the table, behind, and you can use all those little examples for prepositions. Lastly, we have conjunctions, and we have coordinating conjunctions and subordinating conjunctions. Coordinating conjunctions are basically combining 2 similar items, ball and a bat. Ball, and so and is going to be a coordinating conjunction, and, but, so, yet, probably a couple more. I can't think of them right now. Subordinating conjunctions are when you have a main clause and then a subordinate clause. The main clause can act alone. The subordinating clause can't, at least in English. We'll look at that in just a second here. Let's leave the subsentential. Let's go to the sentential level. Let's look at sentence clauses. Okay, and you've got a variety of clauses. You've got a simple clause. You've got a compound clause. You have complex. I take that back. These aren't clauses. These are sentences. You've got a simple sentence, a compound sentence, and a complex sentence. So we'll talk about clauses later. Simple sentence, the man walked, right? Sarah drives me crazy. Tim hit the ball. Subject, verb, object basically is your simple sentence. Then you get a compound sentence, and that's basically two sentences combined with a cohesive device, with a conjunction. The men walked to the park and the girl stayed home. Stayed at home. Either one. Anyway, it's subject, verb, and subject, verb. So we've got a compound sentence. Two sentences combined, connected with a conjunction. Lastly, we have a complex sentence, and that's a main sentence, subject, verb, with a clause. Okay, and a clause is basically a marker, subject, verb. Okay, there are a variety of clauses. We'll talk about them later. Noun clause, adjective clause, adverb clause, of course Santa Claus, everybody knows that one. But it generally has a marker, a subject, and a verb. Okay, and clauses can't stand alone. In other languages, a clause can stand alone, right? We can't write the sentence, for example, in English, because I was hungry, period. That's not a sentence, okay? And we can say that, right? Why did you eat that? Someone else, oh, because I was hungry, right? So we can do that, but it's understood that we're putting the whole sentence together. But when you're writing, you're not allowed to do that. That's illegal. In other languages, you are allowed to do that. So one thing that you want to recognize. So you've got a main sentence, and then you've got subordinated to it, connected to it, you have a clause. And it's connected by some kind of a marker, like the word because, or while, or when. There can be time markers. There can be reason markers. There can be contrastive markers, right? We'll talk about those a little later. We've got three basic kinds of sentences: simple, compound, and complex. Obviously, you can also have compound complex between everything. You can have a variety of segments, a variety of sentence parts combined together. Sentences also have things like mood, markedness, and voice. Mood conveys the speaker's attitude. Okay? And there's a typo there. Look at that. You can have a declarative type of mood where you're giving a command. An interrogative where you're asking a question. I'm sorry, declarative is where you're making a statement. Imperative where you're making a command. Exclamatory where you're being very emotional, you're being very woohoo, or very angry, all right? And then subjunctive is where you're being, I wouldn't say conditional, but you're theorizing the possibilities of things, or that kind of thing. Markedness has to, so we've got mood, okay, and we've got a variety of sentences that show a certain kind of mood. You've got markedness, okay, and that's how atypical or how typical or how difficult a structure is. The more marked a structure is, the more difficult it will be for students to learn, because there are certain things that must be. And it's not always the case that this particular sentence is a marked sentence for all of your students. Some students, they have that in their language, and so it's easier. I was working with a friend of mine who speaks Spanish, and he will often make mistakes with regard to questions in the past tense. He will often say, did you went there, right? Did you saw that movie? He would say, right? And so this is a marked element for him, because in his language, time would be in both places. Or time is attached to the main verb, whereas in our language, in English, it's attached to the first part of the verb. In this case, it would be the auxiliary, and the main part then doesn't have any. It's timeless. But for him, that's marked. Okay? For other people, it's not going to be marked. And then lastly, we have voice, and voice is going to be active or passive. Okay? An active voice is when the subject is doing something. In passive voice is when the subject is not doing something. The subject is probably the recipient, right, of the doing, right? An active sentence would be, I threw the ball, right? An inactive sentence was, the ball was thrown. Okay, the object now becomes the subject. The ball was thrown. That's passive. Okay, and so we've got mood, markedness, and voice. Let's go to the last step here, the suprasentential level, the upper level. Now we're looking at groups of sentences together, and we connect them together through conjunctions, but at this level they're called cohesive devices. Ways to connect sentences and sentences. And a cohesive device is just sticking things together. Things like however and therefore, and of course all the clause markers that we had referred to earlier. When, next, things of time, all right, time or contrast or logical conclusions or lexical reference if we're talking about something that happened before, okay. And we'll talk more about cohesion later on in the discussion, but you should know that there are cohesive devices that don't really fit in the sentence. They kind of connect sentences and ideas together, and that's at the higher level. We also have register. Okay, and register has to deal with the level of formality of the language. I often talk to my students, and these are going to be students at the undergraduate level, and the requirement for them to be have more respect and politeness toward their teachers is definitely a requirement for them. As you get higher up, master's, PhD, oftentimes you start hearing teachers say, call me Steve, call me Dave, you don't need to call me Dr. So-and-so. Just an aside, I had a real difficulty with that when I started going to graduate school. My teachers say, hey, call me Dave. Yes, Dr. Smith, I'll do that. Couldn't do that too well. Anyway, register, level of formality, right? You can lower the register or raise the register depending on, what you're doing here. And part of that, of course, is the social activity. Where are you when you're doing something? When I'm speaking with my boss in his office, I may be able to call him Steve. When I go out and into his class when he's teaching, I may need to call him Mr. Johnson. When he's there. So it might be the location that I'm in. It could be the relationship that you have. One of the things that I like about both Japanese and Spanish is that I can use the language to force a distance between me and somebody else. So if I want to keep my distance, I continue to use proper formal pronouns, and that just establishes a distance. We do that in English, but we don't have the linguistic components in order to actually do that. I was told once when I was in a Spanish class, when a girlfriend is mad at her boyfriend and she wants to let him know we're through, she begins using formal pronouns with him. She doesn't say, for example, she wouldn't use tú anymore with him. She would start using usted. Okay, just to show that distance, which I thought was rather interesting. We can't do that lexically, linguistically, in English. Okay, so the relationship of the participants, right? And then, of course, the communication medium. It's very different communicating text than it is in a formal business letter, right? A letter of application for a job, or a business letter trying to introduce your business to another business, you're very formal, you're very proper, right? Text messaging, not going to happen nearly as well, right? TTYL, right? It's going to be a lot shorter, it's going to be a lot less formal. So there's registers that are going on there. Lastly, we have given, the purpose of a word. We have, it's interesting that this has developed the way it has. It seems to make sense, I guess, but it is rather direct. I don't think it happens in every language. Anyway, given has to do with the information that is transmitted during communication, and oftentimes we transmit information and then we transmit new information. How do we connect these? Well, oftentimes we have an idea and then more description behind it, and that's this whole idea between a main idea or theme and reme. Theme is going to be like your subject or your main idea, and reme is going to be the information that's related to it, that's describing it, that it's about. Okay, and so we often have this theme reme when we're writing sentences, where we introduce a topic and then we introduce information about that topic. Look at the whole concept of writing a standard academic paragraph, where we introduce the topic with a topic sentence and then we provide support for it. That would be a kind of theme reme type of thing. We can do the same thing with given information and new information. Always loved showing students how they can connect paragraphs together by making the first sentence of the second paragraph, the first sentence of the next paragraph, contain old information, the information above. And so they would, for example, you would say, not only do sneakers help you when you run, comma, they also can be a fashion statement, right? Well, not only can they help you run is old information. It's from the paragraph that's before. Okay, they also can help you run. They also can be a fashion statement is new information. And so we're connecting old and new. Okay, we end the focus on the one and we step right into the new. And that's some of the ideas in here with ending the focus on one and moving on to the new one. Okay, now when we're dealing with spoken information, interestingly enough, we try to make those connections with pitch in our voices. Okay, but we can't do that when it's written down, so we have other cohesive devices that help us do that. And this is at the upper level, beyond the level of the sentence, okay? And that's all for this particular chapter. I do hope that I covered everything that you needed. If you do have questions or problems related to this, please let me know, and I will try to help you.